Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the show for Platform, and the platform where we talk about progress, we talk about inspiration, we talk about the entrepreneurial culture, and of course, the African dream. We want to talk here, bring on the dreamers, innovators, change makers, entrepreneurs, and business people, activists that are changing the face of the continent and driving it towards a future that we all want to live, the type of Africa that we all want to be in. And of course, like Gandhi said, being the change that we want to be, or want to see rather. And as always, you're invited to like and subscribe, of course, when you like, really like. And if you don't like, drop a comment and say why not. We're always looking on how we can better bring you the best content and have the best conversations that you want to talk about. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce to you our guest for today. Very exciting guest that we have with a various experience and, of course, beautiful perspective on the African continent. We're talking born and bred on the African continent, and driving his vision for the African continent and contributing in a way that is what we believe is the dream that we all want to have and want to see. Mr. Mark Collie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Buntu. Great to be here. Exciting to be part of this podcast and to see the work and efforts you're making in South Africa to drive people forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I mean, we can't say thank you enough. Now, Mark, you're a venture capitalist, you're an angel investor, and the founder and executive director of AirVantage, right? And I mean that AirVantage is an airtime and data services company that enables telcos to advance airtime and data to their clients, especially in times of emergencies. This is a company that you've grown over the last 9-10 years across many countries, across the Southern African region in Africa, the Caribbean as well, Brazil. And I think about last year or so, we had a blue chip that found itself investing into the company with a 60% stake, and because they believed in the vision that you guys were driving, which is a fantastic drive. And beyond that, of course, you've had another long entrepreneurial journey, founding a company like I think Icon Display, right? Yeah, that was in 2009, 2010, whereby you guys were doing all of the display for the FIFA Confederation Cup as well as the FIFA 2010 Cup in 2009, 2010, and sitting on many boards, some of them of the companies that you founded or at least invested in. And before that, I think working with Prime Media, Operations Director at Wide Open Platform. Illustrious journey on the African continent, but one that's looking forward now into how to transform the people that we care about and that we call ourselves Africans. There's lots of challenges on the African continent, but we're here to talk about opportunities. With every challenge, there is an opportunity.
Sure, thanks very much, Buntu. I didn't realize you'd had so much homework on my past experience. Yeah, I've been very fortunate, lucky to have great experiences in South Africa and to have founded and to brought into some amazing companies and had opportunities to work with amazing people and be part of incredible events.
Amazing.
Like the World Cup, which was really an incredible time in South Africa, and it was right there all the time on the field and in the stands. It was a really special time. And more recently, we've sold a share of our AirVantage business to Blue Label, and they've become a big brother, and together we're working on a lot of new projects which are very exciting. And it's an exciting time to be in South Africa, and I think personally I've also started to make a journey to try and actually make a positive impact in terms of the education space and work with Dr. Teddy Blatcher in terms of his E3 initiative with the Department of Education, which is hugely exciting. And I think that there's so many positive things happening in South Africa, and just people don't have an opportunity to see how many positive things are happening in South Africa, and we should start looking at the positives as opposed to always looking at the negatives. The negatives are always much more exciting to talk about, but the reality is that being positive, looking at positive things can make you a positive person, and I think being a positive person will really result in a much more fulfilling life.
Powerful. You see, it's that last part about positivity really hit home, because the type of conversations that we want to have are those that keep people positive on the street when we wake up in the morning. Last week we spoke about what's your intention today. Are you here to contribute positive to the world? Or are you here to complain that the ATM is in the wrong language today, or something like that? But keeping on the positive note, one of the areas that is a constant negative: youth unemployment, the economy, and inequality. And one of the things that is seen as a cure or a panacea for that is entrepreneurship. We want more businesses, we want more jobs to be created by businesses, but of course entrepreneurs themselves have their own challenges. And the entrepreneurial journey is not one that is for the faint-hearted or often easy. Your journey as an entrepreneur, if you were to look over it just in a brief spectrum, when did that entrepreneurial bug bite you? Because once it bites you, it's very difficult to go back.
I think I've never really worked at a corporate before in my entire life.
Wow.
I think my brief stint is when we sold one of our businesses, a company Wide Open Platform, to Prime Media, and I worked closely with the Prime Media team to hand over that. But I mean, from a young age, I think I've always been excited about sort of embracing my own business. And I think the first university, I started first university, and within the first 3 months, I'd started a business. Actually, at the time, we were supplying cigars to hotels and restaurants, and supplying the Michelangelos, the Villamores.
Okay.
And it was more of quite a fun thing to do, as opposed to just we made some money out of it, but it was really going to these large events and going to these restaurants and being an 18-year-old and teaching people about cigars. So that was really the first
classy cigars.
So that was really the first entrepreneurial venture I sort of embarked on.
Okay.
And from there, I saw an opportunity in terms of supplying cell phones into the Botswana market.
Okay.
And we started supplying handsets from South Africa to Botswana to some of the mobile operators, and we were very fortunate to have some success in that space.
Yes.
And I think one of the big turning points in my life is I met an individual who became my mentor, and today is still a business partner of mine, individual Dr. Jonathan Bear, who's been an incredible, inspirational person in my life, and not just in terms of teaching me incredible business lessons, but also giving me great advice just in terms of life in general, and how one should conduct oneself as a person to other people. And from there, I've had a long journey through outdoor media, printing, doing manufacturing, signage, and then I ended up going back to really where I've always been passionate about. That's really in the mobile technology or technology space. And I founded a business, Advantage, who's my best friend, and we've been very fortunate to grow that business and subsequently invest in other businesses alongside in the mobile tech space. And I think what's important as an entrepreneur is to find something that really excites you, that you can wake up every morning and you don't see it as work, but you see it as something as joy. That you can put so much more into, that it doesn't take out from you. And when you find that thing that you're passionate about, doesn't matter what it is, you can really excel at it. So my only real piece of advice to entrepreneurs is instead of just looking for what could make the most money, look for something that brings you the most happiness. And it may not even be something that makes a lot of money. It might be something in terms of being if you look at Dr. Teddy Blatcher, he's passionate about his Maharishi Institute, he's passionate about education, and he could have made a lot more money doing something else, but he has a much more fulfilling life focusing on something that he's really passionate about, and then you become really excellent in that space too.
And I suppose like you're saying, every day you're living a dream. You feel like you're living a dream because you're chasing your passion. Doesn't mean that your life is perfect. There's many challenges, of course, in that journey, but because you're so passionate about what you're doing, because that you're driven to solve a business problem, and you're driven to solve, sometimes it may be a social problem with a business aspect, that you when the time gets tough, you're able to overcome it, but also you're able to really just become brilliant at it. And that's the motivation that I suppose, like you're saying, when the entrepreneurial bug bit you, it wasn't really about wanting to make large amounts of financial returns. It was fun. It was seeing a gap in the market and seeing that you could solve it, thinking that you'd solve it. I'm an 18-year-old selling cigars. It might be fun to solve this. I can only imagine the style back in those days in terms of how you guys were marketing the cigars and the business. But I really like the point that you touched about on mentorship, because many times that is a make or break for entrepreneurs. Some entrepreneurs that have been able to make it over the chasm of destruction, the chasm of failure, the chasm of sleeping at the office, or the chasm of not being able to fill up your fuel tank, often say that the reason they made it over is because someone opened a door for them. Someone gave them an opportunity. Someone believed in them when even they were sometimes struggling to believe in them. And that aspect of mentorship, do you think that we have the right thinking about it as entrepreneurs, as people that are talking about entrepreneurship? I mean, we might even have people at home right now sitting in their corporate job and thinking, I need to start something, but I don't know an entrepreneur. I don't know anyone who's ever been through that process, and how important that even is. I mean, if you could just let us know how did that really impact you? How did you find the importance of that in the process of being an entrepreneur, and whether or not other entrepreneurs should make sure that they find something like that?
So I think being an entrepreneur, yes, there are moments that are incredibly exciting and a lot of very joyful, but like everything else, there's lots of challenges. And I think what's important being an entrepreneur in terms of starting something and finishing something is how you view those challenges and how you tackle those challenges. If you're someone who has a challenge and all of a sudden sees it in a negative light and says, okay, here's a challenge and I can't surmount that challenge, I can't pass that challenge, then you've got a problem. But you've got to look at a challenge, you've got to embrace the challenge, and those challenges are often very hard and they're very tough. And like you said, sleeping. I mean, during the World Cup, I was sleeping in the factory while we were printing, because we had 24-hour shifts and we had to swap shifts. We had to make sure things were getting out the factory in time to make sure they were dressed on the stadium by the time the game started. And I didn't look at it like this is not possible. It is possible. We've just got to throw everything into it. I've got to put everything behind it. And when it comes to a mentor, and I think in some very tough times I've had before in business, and where I've had Jonathan Beer as an amazing mentor, is a lot of people say that you often have a business partner that is great when the times are great. That business partner is there.
Yes.
But I think a true test to a business partner or mentor is when the times are bad.
I see.
And when the times are bad, that's when Jonathan was there the most. And it was quite incredible to have that support and capacity for someone as a mentor say, I've gone through that before, I've had a similar situation before, and there's a way around, there's a way through it, and I'm here to support you on that journey to get through it. So it's and to say, even if you're in a corporate, doesn't mean you need to start something new on your own as an entrepreneur, but rather than look, I'm in a corporate and I want to be in a corporate, let me be the best I can be in the corporate and do something great within that corporate and inspire other people in that corporate to be the best that they can. So, I mean, it all comes down to the environment you're in. Are you happy to be in that environment? Are you happy to work with the people? Do you see yourself having a great future with those around you? And the one thing I've also learned in business when I've come across people that are negative and are constantly negative and keep dragging me down, you've got to eventually say, listen, and even you've got to take a view that you've got to move on and find a new place to be. I think the biggest thing is if you're in an environment that you believe you can prosper, and then focus on prospering. But if you're not in an environment where you think you've got any chance of really growing out and prospering, then it's time to consider alternatives.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, what I'm hearing there is that, ladies and gentlemen, you are not here to keep knocking on doors that never open. You are here to go where you're welcome, and to know when you're welcome is one of those things of self-awareness, and maybe sometimes that a mentor could show you, but you're not here to be knocking on doors every single day and not having a breakthrough, because there's brilliance in every single one of us. And when we go to the point about the mentor, it sounds like you're saying, you know, sometimes they're a business partner, sometimes they're a mentor, sometimes they're there. We talk about the mechanics of the business, and sometimes they're there. We're talking about the less mechanics of the business, or rather the connections and the spirit maybe of the business. I listen to Tony Robbins a lot, and sometimes he says that, you know, business is the success of business is 80% mechanics, 20% spirit. No, sorry, the other way around. 80% spirit, 20% mechanics. The mechanics, you can split it into place, business management, these are the processes, this is the market, understand the markets, your research, but all the other stuff that comes in, like the determination you're talking about, believing in yourself, knowing whether you're in the right place or not, the self-awareness, the self-doubt that many entrepreneurs go through when especially they're in an environment that is not conducive for entrepreneurship. That's outside of business, and sometimes the mentor speaks to. And I can imagine there's been many challenges in your journey where you thought this is impossible, or what is wrong with me, or making a sacrifice that you thought you would never do, or doing something that you thought you'd never do. Are there any of those that come to mind, just to give the guys context at home, that whether maybe they're going through something similar, or maybe they're thinking, I can do this, and then when they get to that point, then they realize this is something I thought I could never do, and this is outside of complete context, and then they might think about giving up. But getting a perspective of someone who's walked that and experienced something and had to change themselves to overcome it, sometimes can keep them going.
So I think in the world we currently live in, things are changing so quickly in terms of with the technology out there. Business, like you said, it's 20% mechanics, 80% spirit, because it's such a fast, dynamic, changing world. We can't change quickly. The mechanic is going to change. There's no doubt the mechanic is going to change. What you were doing before is not going to be the same thing you're doing tomorrow. And as long as you have the spirit to change those mechanics, and I think being in the telco mobile space, everything we look at is, you look at the mobile operators themselves are being disrupted. Is that this disruption is going to come, and you either got a view that you're going to be steadfast and stay in your line of business and defend that line of business, or you're going to disrupt yourself. And if you're not willing to disrupt yourself, somebody else will. So one thing I've always been forward. I've always looked at what is the next thing that's coming, and instead of sitting back and waiting for that thing to take our business, I've decided let's move on. So one of the reasons I got out of the printing branding space was it's a very manufacturing, a lot of machinery, managing a lot of people. It's a big animal to sort of change. And I've always liked the more nimble environments, and that's why when you're looking at the telco technology space, as opposed to buying another 20 million rand of machinery so you can have the latest technology, because everybody wants the latest technology. It's almost like, well, it's really much about just pushing out new servers and programming new servers, and it's a much easier animal to change the direction it's going. So from a personal challenge, during the World Cup was quite a trying time for me for many reasons, and I thought we weren't going to actually get through it. And we didn't just manage to get through it, we actually became one of, the local organising teams. They were very proud of the work we did on the actual printing and the branding of and when they came to present to FIFA, we actually did a video of them of all the branding we had done, and we became one of their star performers. And it was a time when we thought we were just not going to accomplish. There were a lot of politics to deal with. There was a lot of manufacturing requirements. There was installation requirements, and it was a very trying time, and it was a very rewarding time when you got over that challenge.
Wow, 24/7. 24/hour shifts. Unimaginable by most people's standards, I'll probably say. Especially, we're so accustomed to a 9-to-5 culture in South Africa. and many parts of the world potentially. But when we talk about an entrepreneurial culture, we're talking about a 24/7 culture. We're talking about you live this, you breathe this. And whether you are in a 9 to 5 as well, you can still have an entrepreneurial culture. It doesn't mean that you're not entrepreneurial. And I think some of the things highlighting on how to overcome, but also finding the gap, is this element of an entrepreneurial culture, and also even seeing that manufacturing is an industry that is not, maybe doesn't have that much of a future on the continent, or even in South Africa. I mean, that's a conversation that I think is very rife in terms of where is the continent going when we're looking at the industries. I mean, we have lots of people speaking a lot about 4IR, and we've got coding schools happening everywhere, and whether that now represents where the content should be going as the future. What should we be dreaming about? But at the same time, we've got SMEs, brick and mortar businesses that are being started every single day, going into the ESD supply chains, and 32 billion rands being spent annually on that ESD spending annually. But is that where we should be going? Should we be talking manufacturing? Should we be talking next stage of business? What the next opportunity of business?
So I think when it comes to manufacturing, I think when you're trying to compete with a product that is just very difficult to compete on, when all the raw materials come from are being manufactured elsewhere, and it's very much it's the latest technology in terms of that manufacturing, and most surely also the cost of electricity is important. So I think if you can identify the areas where we have competitive advantages in terms of manufacturing, in terms of that, it makes total sense, especially if you're importing certain things, like importing. If you're manufacturing items that can be easily imported, it's complicated. Like if you look at the bed space, there's massive bed manufacturing factories throughout South Africa.
Okay.
And why do they have a competition? Because it doesn't make sense to bring beds from China.
Okay.
And I think perhaps there'd be opportunities in terms of, say, raw material, where the raw material is coming out of South Africa to not just ship that raw material to countries that are producing, but to rather take them further down the supply chain. And then I think there's a lot to say about making products that are African products. That there's a lot of excitement around African products, made in Africa products. So it's certainly not to say that there's no space. There's a big space for manufacturing, but I think it's about identifying the areas where we can have a competitive advantage to other exporting countries.
So it's really about the guys thinking about what's the value that we can bring. What are we making that at the end of the day we're still importing back again? So are we exporting a raw material that is then going to China or going to Europe, and then it's being produced into something that then is sold back here, whereas we could cut that whole loop, which I suppose is a big conversation going on generally. But I'm very, when we look at content on a global level, there's a lot of competition coming in. Globalization is eating up markets. Things are getting cheaper to get into the country, and when we look at how value is being created, it's really about where things are made, and there's not very many things being made on the continent, and this doesn't help the inequality gap between the north and the south, and all emerging countries, and whether or not now we should be, as entrepreneurs, how should be our thinking be when we think about working with the world globally and this global challenge that's coming in?
So if you look at it now, I think we should work towards our strengths. I mean, the one thing obviously that's there's been huge growth in South Africa are the call centers.
Okay.
Is basically having South African speaking call centers in terms of servicing European countries, even American countries, and actually even if you look at we've got some of the greatest developers. If you look at Amazon setting up offices down in Cape Town, and a lot of international companies setting up development hubs down in Cape Town, and I think there's a space that if we can actually get into the 4 hours revolution, which is really we've got to get the skilled developers out the learning institutions and find place for them to find, because that's really an international global opportunity. We've got Africa is going to have the largest, I think if it doesn't already have it, as the largest youth population in the world as a continent. And the youth are best positioned to absorb new technologies, new coding, new ideas. And I think if we can embrace that as not just a South Africa, as a continent where we can actually really, there's no point in us having requirements here to do development or coding and outsourcing that to India, because there's a lot of talent in South Africa. We've got to nurture that talent. We've got to find that talent. We've got to give them an opportunity to be the source of the work that we're trying to do. And I think there's a lot of creativity coming out of Africa, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for Africans to create African products for African people. Everybody wants their, and we're talking about it earlier, everybody wants their local content. If you look at Nollywood and Bollywood and movies, yes, there's a requirement for the big box office states, but there's actually there's a hunger for local content. So that would be the same for local applications, local software, and we're seeing a lot of exciting stuff in South Africa. If you look at the sweep south that's starting, there's I think it's one cart or that's, and there's a lot of great applications, and then you look at things also like M-Pesa in Kenya. It's a world leader when it comes to mobile money. I mean, when you go to Kenya, it's phenomenal what you can pay with, and the most exciting thing was 20 years ago when we were doing banking on USSD. We were the most advanced mobile market in the world in terms of financial services. Yes, we've taken a step back because smartphones have come out, and there's obviously a much richer application on those smartphones, which has taken us, now it's rolling out much more aggressively in first world countries. But when the smartphone adoption starts coming into the African continent in the way that is required, which is happening, and the data usage starts happening, we're going to leapfrog a lot of environments and industries, because it gives us an opportunity to actually not replace the incumbent, but to be the standard.
That's very exciting. I mean, talking more about opportunities, talking about more about what's happening and the good things that are going on. I also tend to lean over to say, the industries, mining, we've seen it's a sunset industry. It's bleeding jobs. We've seen manufacturing industries as well bleeding jobs. And even sometimes some of the parts of the financial banking or the banking industry, financial sector, where they had the face-to-face, they're also bleeding jobs. But where we do, what I'm hearing, what you're saying is how can we nurture the jobs of the future, the opportunities of the future that are still leveraging potentially from these previous industries and the competitive advantage that we have there, but going into spaces like telco, going into spaces like the digital age.
So I think a very good example, I mean, when you've got someone trying to protect their current environment, their current turf, without really looking at like what the future holds and trying to, and a good example was Eskom. So I mean, I understand, from a South African perspective, we want to protect the coal mining industry. We want to protect the people that are working in terms of the current coal-powered power stations throughout South Africa. But if you look at what's happening with solar today, solar is a far better and more efficient technology than coal power plants. It's at a stage now where to replace a coal power plant with solar is cheaper than to continue running that coal power plant. And you've got to take the view that yes, certain people are going to be disrupted, but the long-term benefit that if we were to swap out our coal power plants for solar power plants, not only there would be a net increase in jobs, because solar has its own whole dynamic in terms of the workforce that's required to actually build, deploy, maintain these solar power plants, and it's a much cleaner. That's taking away the environmental issues that you have with it. But it's very difficult for Eskom to sort of see this, because they've invested in these legacy power stations. And what scared me tremendously was the other day they came out with an article saying that they want to reduce the cost per kilowatt and start charging more for access, because they see solar as a technology that's disrupting them. So as opposed to saying let's embrace that technology that's disrupting us, they want to put up roadblocks to stop it. Now, it's going to happen. It's going to come. You can't stop it.
Because the world is going that direction.
It's going that direction, and the technology, the advances in solar, it's just becoming cheaper and cheaper. So as opposed to trying to stop it and jeopardizing their own business, and in this case, it's not jeopardizing Eskom, it's jeopardizing the country, is rather embrace solar and say, let's move forward with solar. I think they came out with a policy guideline this week saying they want this energy mix of solar, and the rand actually strengthened, which showed that there's a positive interpretation. But they need to do it faster. They need to move forward, because it doesn't just make financial sense. It makes job creation sense, and it makes environmental sense.
It makes social sense.
Social sense, and I mean, all these things. Even like, I was recently at a Singularity event, which is just an amazing mind opener.
That was the last 2 days.
The last 2 days, and it's just an amazing mind opener to see incredible speakers they come from all over the world, who are experts in certain industries, and there's one expert, Ramez, in solar, and he came out with the numbers and figures.
Okay.
And I mean, these are different experts in different fields, and I was fortunate enough to spend some additional time with them, and it's inspiring to see these people that have seen things globally and come to South Africa and pass on their knowledge and their experience, and inspire us, hopefully as a country, as a continent, to really embrace these new technologies, opposed to fight it, and there's the stuff you're looking at now. You think these are futurist things that are happening in 3, 5, 10 years time.
It's here.
It's here. It's exciting.
It's not everywhere.
It's just not everywhere. It's everywhere. It's like, years ago you used to see something. This will be in 3, 5 years time. People just talk about what's coming. Yeah. Now when they come and talk at the conferences, this is what's here. This is what's happening.
And it already looks like it's 10 years from now.
Exactly. But it's here.
And those are the conversations we're not having enough. I mean, we really appreciate to be able to share those words and get that context. But I think from a policy perspective, from a corporate perspective, those are the conversations we're not having enough about. What is the future of our business? What is the future of industry? How do we disrupt ourselves? And I think that's the way that we should be talking about change in general, and something that I very much believe in. I mean, the example that you're sharing as well, linking to Singu, I think Peter Diamandis is one of the founders of Singu, right? Yeah. And he wrote the book Abundance, and in there he also mentions how the potential that could happen if even a company like Eskom were to switch over to being a solar company or a renewables company. It should be a completely new paradigm in terms of industry they're building and the jobs creation that they'd be doing. And speaking about disruption, and in the telco industry, and particularly on the continent, I love when you said we were advanced with USSD, and then the iPhone brought us back, took us a step back, because I think in South Africa we don't think that way. We think that the iPhone was a step forward, but actually USSD was an African innovation that completely revolutionized how some of the guys could access money and share money, etc. And where you sitting now in that telco industry, we're seeing cell phone penetration, internet penetration, mobility going the fastest on the continent, growing the fastest, and in some countries, I think South Africa as well, we've got more cell phone connections than we've got people. I think twice as many or something like that. Nigeria as well got about 160 million cell phone connections, and when you've got that mix, something's got to happen. Something exciting's got to happen. What are some of the exciting things that you think mobility, connectivity, and telecoms disruption is going to happen for us?
So I think obviously the telecom operators themselves are being disrupted in a very big way. Their voice revenues are basically on a dive. The SMS is almost dead, and that's obviously through the WhatsApp. But where the telco industries have seen an opportunity is through the financial services. So obviously across Africa, except for really South Africa, where the banks are really entrenched, is the mobile operators are really the choice of banking for for most of these countries, when they launch a mobile money network, they have the penetration into the rural areas. They're able to offer a cash in, cash out solution at 20,000 locations, as opposed to an established bank who has 20 branches across the country. So that they've really pivoted in that direction. And it's the right direction, because, to be honest with you, for a telco to try and build a better app than an Uber is going to be very complicated. I mean, it's going to be tough. So if they can be the facilitator and say Uber can now operate, but we'll be the cash in and cash out, and we'll offer some savings and lending on the back of that, mobile financial services, and perhaps some insurance, that's the right direction for them to go. But in terms of the opportunities that it's going to open, when every single person in Africa has a mobile, has a smartphone device, and has the ability to connect it with data, and the data prices are dropping, connected all the time, with the ability to cash in and cash out onto that device with a multitude of applications, being able to buy international content, being able to learn an international course. I mean, it's phenomenal what can come out of this. And I think it's just about making sure that as an African continent, we embrace those opportunities. As the regulators, they embrace those opportunities. They don't try and limit them to try to protect the turf of another organization. They need to say, we need to, if learning online is going to disrupt the universities, then let it disrupt the universities. Let the universities find their own way to be a disruptive organization and a better organization than to say, we're going to stop those online learning channels coming in. Because in the end of the day, we have to look at what's going to make South Africa a better place. And what's going to make South Africa a better place, having people that are gaining access to more of the to a global world, a global economy. And it's also very exciting what's happening from a global economy. I mean, people are making, if you look now what guys are starting to make on YouTube, and people are playing games, there's international opportunities for South Africans and Africans sitting in their local territory. I mean, there's micro jobbing that's coming up. There's Fiverr, where guys can from their home do work for someone in South Africa can do work for someone in London. And that's where we actually maybe have a huge opportunity, because the general cost of living in Africa is cheaper than the rest, which means we should be able to charge for some of those services at a cheaper, provided we have the ability to actually make the quality and deliver. And if we can upskill those people for a mobile device and let them input their output through that mobile device and service those international clients, the opportunity is tremendous. So I know everyone, you've got to look at it, it's like a challenge. If you look at technology as something that's going to disrupt you and as a problem that you're going to face, as opposed to embracing it, that's when you're going to be left behind. You've got to look at it and say, I see this coming my way, and instead of being the person of I'm going to sit here and protect my turf and fight everything, I'm going to embrace it, even if it means killing my own business, but I have a bigger business afterwards and something else.
And being able to see the challenge head on and embrace it.
Correct.
The mindset of abundance. I think maybe that's one of the key traits of an entrepreneur. It's someone who believes that even if my business were to close tomorrow, even if I were to lose everything today, the day after tomorrow, I'll be up again. I'll rise again. There'll be opportunities. Maybe that's the thing. That's the thing about dreaming, because you believe even though there isn't something here right now concrete that I can touch. I'm not where I want to be. I don't know all the knowledge I need to know to make my business successful. I don't have all the networks, but it is possible. And I believe in more than what I see. I have a mindset of abundance as an entrepreneur, and also maybe the culture that we need to be cultivating into our children, into our schools. Particularly talking about schools is giving one the knowledge, the skills, but one also the mindset in that process. And I know that you are getting very much heavily involved in the education in South Africa and on the continent, and how we should be shaping it, how we should be giving learners an opportunity to be able to participate globally and compete globally at world class. What could you break down just a little bit more about an entrepreneurial thinking at a young age? What should we be telling our children? What should we be hoping that teachers are doing? What should we be, even as young people, if you're 16, if you're 18, 22 is young, how should you be still changing your ways to become more entrepreneurial?
So I think the one thing that's very important, I think that everyone sees failing as a bad thing, but you've got to see failing as a good thing, as long as you learn from that failure. And if you look at some of the Silicon Valley startups or the VCs right now in the US, they like to see someone coming out who's failed before, because it's important to be someone who's failed and learned and got up and moved on again. That's, and I think that's something that needs to be taught to the young people, the teachers. Everyone needs to realize that just because you failed one thing doesn't mean you're going to fail. You've got to keep on trying. And there's so many examples of incredible entrepreneurs. I mean, if you look at is it Ray Kroc from McDonald's? How many times he failed? How many things he tried to do until he finally got McDonald's?
658 or something like that. When he finally got it.
When he finally got it, and there was a multitude of businesses before that were total failures. I mean, and he finally, and so you've got to look at this. The first thing I think we've got to realize across South Africa is that failure should not be seen as a bad thing. It should be seen as a learning opportunity. And hopefully you don't make that same. It's only a mistake if you make it twice. You've got to recognize it a mistake, but it's a real mistake if you make the same mistake twice. So you've got to learn from your mistakes. So that's very important. I think also, one of the initiatives I'm working with Taddy in terms of with the Department of Education is, I mean, there's a multitude of international studies, and you can see what's happening internationally, what's working from an educational perspective. And so a big element of education is what they call project-based learning, as opposed to just providing content to someone. You actually learn in a project environment.
An opportunity to fail.
You do a project together and you learn more through that project. So we're trying to work we are working with the Department of Education to actually introduce project-based learning. And I've got to say, it's quite amazing how open and supportive the Department of Education are. They realize that there's opportunities in the curriculum and in terms of process, and we just want to introduce some interesting things in terms of WhatsApp and creating WhatsApp channels to teachers so they can talk and communicate and understand, either on a one-to-one basis or on a group basis. And the next big thing is to be able to make content available in the cloud that is relative to teachers, parents, and students, and hopefully getting those that content available for free to those teachers and learners. It's disruptive because it's. I think there's so much available now. If you look at the content out there, I mean, a person can become and there's actually an interesting talk given by Mick Mann at Singularity, where he's one of the co-founders of Singularity South Africa. How there's a javelin thrower in Kenya who learned to throw a javelin throwing a stick in his village, and there was no money for javelin throwers in Kenya. There was actually, the money was all went to the runners. So what did he do? He went and learned javelin throwing on YouTube. And he landed up winning the African Games. And I think he might have won the Commonwealth Games, a gold, and he got a silver in the Olympic Games. And they call him the YouTuber. He learned to javelin throw from YouTube. So if you can learn to do a sport of javelin throwing from YouTube, imagine.
It's so kinesthetic. It's so real. It's so physical.
You think you'd need a coach here to say, but it's not the case anymore. So I think whatever you want to do, whatever it be, if you want to become a mechanical engineer, a data scientist, a philosopher, it's all available online. It's just, how do you get access to that? How do you start that journey? And hopefully that we can find a way to make that access free. Because access to knowledge should be free. It should be free, and I think if we can get that right in South Africa, the impacts will be profound.
That's unbelievable. Like you're saying, completely free. UN announced internet is a human right, ladies and gentlemen. That is what we're talking about. It's that if you don't have access to internet, you don't have opportunities, and you can't perform. You don't have the same potential that someone else who does. But in South Africa, we do have some of the highest, or even on the continent, some of the highest data costs globally. And we had the FISMA. I mean, this time it was data much more. But I mean, even if you're in Zambia, for example, or to a gig or so might cost you. It's very expensive, especially compared to the minimum wage. Compared to the minimum wage, it could be some like 2% or 5% of someone's earnings, just for a gig, and that makes it very difficult to roll out these types of solutions, and impact the lives in the way that we do. However, at the same time, we do know that by 2030 or so, guys like Elon Musk and guys like Jeff Bezos are planning to have internet accessible to everyone all over the world using satellite technology, etc. And I want to go in that direction to say that I really appreciate what you're saying, to say that we should be having more conversations with our leaders in business, in government, to not think about short-termism. How can we solve our quarterly issues? How can we get back to office 5 years from now in terms of looking good and saving the coal industry, for example? But when data is completely free to everybody, what's the opportunity that we can have, and how can we prepare our young people for that? And in the circles that you've been in, and the tables that you've sat on and spoken to and had, whether that's backlash or some guys saying yes, let's do that, like the Department of Education, how do you think we can have more conversations at a high level and really start to take South African leaders and leadership and just the society on a walk of abundance thinking, of tomorrow thinking? Should we have more Singu conferences? Should we have more consultants? Should we have more content?
I think there's two things on that. I think that, obviously singularity, again, I'm talking, there's one speaker, Dave Roberts, who's an expert in disruption.
Okay.
And he was in South Africa recently, and he said, actually, there's actually a lot of very good things happening in South Africa that people don't see, because there's so many good things actually happening. But, his thought was, and his suggestion was, as South Africa we should focus on one thing. Okay. If we could identify, and if you look what's really brought countries like Singapore, like China, like India, they focused on saying, let's alleviate 90% of the poverty. Because if you focus on one grand challenge, then everything else needs to...
moonshot.
It's a moonshot, but then everything else needs to come in line. Then you need to have access to education. You need to have quality. You need all those things fall in place. So if we could come together as a South African and say, we're going to focus on alleviating poverty, and underneath that there's so many things that need to come in place, like access to educational learning or internet. I mean, you look at it, and I'm not, the data fees are too expensive, and they will come down, they have to come down. But if a mobile operator can take a view saying, let's rather give people access to this particular content for free, they won't make anything now of giving them access to relevant content, but by upskilling those people, they're going to become more economically active. And then in 15 to 20 years, there will be bigger customers who are buying, at that stage, 200, 300 gigs of data. Yeah. So they need to take a view that, and it shouldn't be a difficult view to take, because currently a lot of those people that are school students don't have the funds to even pay for any access to data. So if you can give them access to some data, yes, there may be a slight load on the network, but if that data is locally on a local server, it's not a significant cost for the operator. But by contributing to that benefit, a long-term benefit, one, you'll have economically active customers in 15, 20 years, but those economically active customers will recognize that the MTNs, the Vodacoms, or the Cell Cs, or the Telcoms gave them the opportunity to access that data for free, and gave them the opportunity to learn and to grow and to become an economic participant in this country.
Yeah, and then at that point, we've got disruption happening to those that are trying to disrupt the telcos. Yeah. Or at least reverse disruption in that sense. And I wanna jump into take it a little more micro, back to business, back to the entrepreneurial journey. And particularly in our book, we talk about an approach to an investment case. How you take the right steps towards presenting your business in a way that will make sense to an investor, in a way that will create a partnership that is financial or and also supportive, strategic in some areas. So some of the guys at home are asking themselves, Mr. Collie, could you share us a little bit more on the way you approach investment, and also what is an investor, what is a VC, what is an angel investor, and how do you, at least from your perspective, view yourself in that space, and the way that you're making investments, and so on.
So we don't see ourselves as traditional VCs. We like to take quite an active, participative role in the business we invest in. And I think the most important thing for us when we meet a potential investment opportunity is the person.
Okay.
Is it a person that we think we can, because really we want to be someone we can have a cup of coffee and enjoy having that cup of coffee with.
Yes.
So it needs to be someone that we immediately have an affinity to, that we think we can do something together. That it's not going to be we don't want to be a frictional partnership where they see one way and we see the other way. And traditionally we normally let the entrepreneur run their own journey with us giving some advice. So I think the first thing is the person that we're aligned in terms of our goals and vision. The second thing is when we're investing, we're not investing in the company to almost cash out that participant at that point in time. Our investment is to go into the business to grow the business.
Okay.
We want to grow the business together with that entrepreneur. We want to build something much bigger. We don't have any particular. We're very fortunate. We're not a traditional fund where we have certain timelines. We put money in and we have to exit within 5 years. We can returns. So we don't have any of those obligations. We're there on the long term. So for us, it's about finding the person. The person, you can have great businesses with terrible people and the business will go nowhere. And you can have a great person in a terrible business and you'll find something that's going to work. Because it's all about the people. So one, it's about finding the right person, having the right long-term view and seeing that we can be partners over the long term. And then the second thing is obviously that we're coming in to put money in to grow the business. Any money we're putting in is to grow the business, is to build the business. It's not to all of a sudden increase salaries, expensive offices. It's about
pay for debt.
But even debt, if the business is over debt and we can help try recover, but we just want to see that the money's going into the right things to build a bigger business for mutually beneficial for both. And eventually we'll see, maybe we'll stick together forever together in that business earning dividends, or maybe someone will come knocking on the door and the entrepreneur says, listen, it's time to exit, and we'll exit together.
Okay.
So we see it, for us it's a long-term partnership, and the person comes first, and then the actual opportunity comes second.
Okay, so the entrepreneur's got to communicate, number one, that they are the right person, personally, in the sense, and that might be two ways as well, because the entrepreneur can sit there and say, maybe I don't want to work with this investor, maybe this is not going to be a very good partnership, because we see a lot of entrepreneurs taking money out of desperation, in the long term putting their business at risk because of taking money with a caustic investor.
So I think specifically on that point, I mean, and I've seen it before actually. There's been investment opportunities where we had a great relationship with a potential investor, but someone else came, knocked on the door and offered them more money. And we said, listen guys, we're not here to horse trade. If you want to take that, you must take that. And if you're taking an investor or a partner just because of the money they're giving you, and not because of the long-term partnership or the value that partner can bring to the business, I mean, it's not about the money. Yeah. It's about the part. It's really, when you get into it's a marriage. Yeah. And the last thing you want to do is get married with someone that you actually don't see a long-term future. It's a short-term gain with no long-term answer, because maybe you'll gain for the first 2 years, but in the long term, and in this particular example, I mean, this company was actually quite a sad example. They had just developed a credit card technology in terms of taking credit cards on a mobile phone. This was before mobile money. They had partnered with MTN. They were rolling this technology out with MTN. The next step was to launch a mobile money network, remittances back and forth. And we made them an offer which was enough working capital to actually really grow the business and expand into Africa. And it would have been a fantastic. The people were great. The opportunity was great. And then there was an offshore listed entity on the NASDAQ. Who came and said, listen guys, we want this technology part of our listing. We'll give you shares in our NASDAQ listed business for all your IP, all your contracts, but you've got to house it in our US listed entity. So they moved all there. They got these shares that the value was actually 4 or 5 times that we were offering. Sure. But they were locked into a 2-year period, and by the time the 2-year period was up, the shares were worthless, and all their IP, their whole company was now owned by an offshore listed entity. So I mean, I saw them several years ago, and they were after that event, and they were like, it was unfortunate because it was a great opportunity for us, great opportunity for them, and it's unfortunate they took the short-term view as opposed to the long-term view.
And it's that entrepreneurial journey, that appreciation of this is life thing for me. This is more than just business. It's me solving something that I really feel passionate about, and I really think should be solved. And I suppose when someone has that perspective, they're not going to be thinking about the financial returns. They're more thinking about what's the best way to form the best relationships and take the long-term view to really solve this issue. At least that's the one aspect.
Yeah.
Then there's the other aspect of being clear about your mechanics of how this money will flow in the business and create more value than the money that was put in the first place. And sometimes I think, seeing a lot of pitches and helping some startups raise some funding, that's not always clear up front in terms of how much am I spending to get new customers, how much am I spending every month, and how many months do I need before I can lock in this many customers, and when is my cash zero, etc., and what this money as an investor that's being put in is going to then generate the returns that we're looking for as a business, but also as an investor.
So I think obviously everyone has Excel forecasts, and the reality is these Excel forecasts are never accurate.
Right.
They're never accurate, and I think even as an investor, we sort of know they're not accurate. But I think what's important is the fundamentals you put into those Excel forecasts are correct. That if your rental is meant to be X, it doesn't end up being X plus 20 or X plus 30, because those unless there's a conscious decision we need to grow into new space, but like your fundamental costs need to stay your fundamental costs, and if you're going to charge, and things can change, but they've got to be in a way that you sort of know what your business is and you understand that. And when it comes to items like finding out how to acquire a customer, it's important when you come and say I need X amount of money to grow the business. Where is that money going to spend? How are you going to spend? How are you going to see that return? Exactly, where is the benefit? Because the one thing I've seen is you get sometimes see investors, and the first thing they want to go get is expensive, lavish offices. Now, how exactly is that going to really turn it? And sometimes there isn't the importance of it because you want to recruit some of the best talent.
Sure.
But I think that if you're at that point at a starting position, you want to recruit talent, and again, it's another
for the long term.
Long term is like guys say, well, we need expensive salaries for top engineers. I'd rather say, listen, let's bring the engineer down at a more reasonable salary cost, and let's rather give them incentives on the upside. Let's rather let them be part of the growth. Let them be part. Let's align all the motives. I mean, the more to grow, the more you can somehow bring your fixed costs down and have a variable cost increase with the line of the growth, the better the business.
Fantastic. I think when the guys are, trying to think about where to go as a business and how to use that money, often there is that gap between the communication of the founder and investor and the investee or the investable opportunity. Now, some of the investments that you guys have done doesn't have to be names, but just sort of getting a sense of what you're looking for, and which areas really align to your investment ethos in terms of the business that is investing, and where you guys are trying to grow, and synergies around your portfolio. Who have you invested in? What types of businesses, and what are you looking for?
So I think there's an element now. You want to find investments that also have a good impact in terms of the environment. So the few investments we've invested in a money remittance business in terms of expats working in country and be able to send money home to their family and bringing those costs down significantly, because currently there's a lot of people that are working to make money to send home to feed their family or be charged very excessive remittance fees. So we've invested in a business in South Africa. We've built out a mobile solution. We've partnered with a company called RIA, which is actually the second or third largest money remittance brand in the world, but no one's really heard of them because they're a massive organization, but they've never really come into SADC before, so we're helping them expand into SADC. So we're trying to find ways to reduce your money remittance cost from South Africa to Zimbabwe to Malawi, and that's also money coming in. They've got a huge international network, so people living abroad sending money home to South Africa, helping them facilitate that and building out a whole technology stack, and we're quite proud of the technology we've built. We've also got an investment in a Section 12J fund where there's a tax incentive in terms of investing in underlying assets that help grow the economy. So there's been a lot of investment in property and hotels. We're setting up a solar fund to invest in solar in that fund. We've invested in a mobile money aggregation business that operates in Zambia and Uganda, and we're trying to see, they've got amazing case studies in terms of actually enabling digital payments to and from farmers, in terms of paying those farmers for the goods produced and allowing those farmers to buy raw materials from the local organizations to grow. So we're trying to pivot that business to focus in a very, well, I mean, wouldn't say pivot, the business is a great business on its own, but find something that can be a specialist asset that really there's a massive demand, because I think farming in Africa it's a massive industry, and it's actually one of the industries we could be a great, we should be a net exporter. I mean, if you look at certain, there are regions where, and also because of seasons, there's huge opportunity, but we haven't been able to really reach that commercial scale on certain elements, and that's a lack of funding, lack of education, and all these things can be passed digitally. So we've invested in that business. We see there's a great opportunity in that, and I think it's, when you look, yes, we're very technology orientated, and that we look for that, but I think it's about finding something that really resonates with you as an investor, that's something that you can really be passionate about, that you're really going to take to the next level, and work with the entrepreneurs to build something that's not just replicatable in South Africa and Africa, but hopefully potentially you could replicate outside of Africa. And even this the E3 initiative, which is not a profitable endeavor, it's if we can build something that can show real scale in South Africa, we could potentially export that anywhere in the world. Like there's a concept called 6 bricks, which I know you're aware of, which was invented by a South African, Brent is an amazing individual who's created this product where you have 6 bricks, and with these 6 bricks you can create a multitude of different configurations. And he started it as a South African initiative, and Lego saw it, and Lego bought into this initiative, and not only has it become incredibly successful in South Africa, it's now become an international product in foreign markets, in all sorts of markets. I mean, Brent's ambition is to have these 6 bricks on the desk of every single learner, and it teaches you spatial configurations. It's an amazing tool for students, and every student should have it. And that's an example of something that's South African that's now become an international format, and that's what we should really be focusing on. We should be saying, as South Africans, what can we build that's not only going to work in South Africa and Africa, what can we build that is going to become an international success? At
the heart of it is, who are we as Africans, what are our dreams, and what can we do to cultivate the Africa that we want, the Africa that we need, and our individual roles as business people, as entrepreneurs, as activists, politicians, in our own circles. What can we do to cultivate that Africa? And I think we should be talking more opportunities and less challenges. Like you're saying, there's so many awesome things happening on the continent, and we hope to bring more of those to you. And I think in closing, we always ask but before I do ask, let me please.
So my closing is that there's a lot of people that are doing. There's a lot of people spreading what is being done, and I'd like to thank you, Ubuntu, for actually being part of that. I know that you're also doing, but also finding ways to take those stories and spread them, because it's great having people doing things, but if we can spread those across a multitude of more people, it will inspire more and more people, and this has to be a cascading effect. So the more that we can do, the more that we can get out there, the better it's going to be for everyone on South Africa and the African continent.
Amazing. So a story that you would then tell Mr. Collie, if he was today 18, 25, or just starting out on the African continent, what dream what dream do you see for Africa, and what should 20-year-old Mr. Collie be focusing on right now for that dream?
That's a tough question. I think where I would turn around to myself, because I was passionate about technology. When I was 18, I wanted to get into building out mobile applications, spreading digital technologies across Africa, introducing mobile money, introducing financial services, introducing education on mobile. That was really my passion. And for some reason, I don't regret where I went, because I had a journey and it was exciting in terms of outdoor media and printing. It was a lot of excitement, but really, I should have stuck in that area that really made me passionate, because if I would have stuck there, I would have been 10, 12 years ahead of where I am today, and having a much bigger impact. And I don't regret anything I've done, because it's important. What I've done is part of the journey to get here. But I think I was successful in what I did, but I think I would have been much more successful in that particular technology mobile, because I was so passionate about it.
So passionate. So find your passion and follow it, no matter what your mother says, no matter what your next door neighbor says, no matter what the bills are saying. Find your passion and follow it, because 15, 20 years time, it's a different world, it's a different Africa. It's your dream that we're talking about here, and that's not something that we want to play with lightly. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely a pleasure and an honor having you here. And ladies and gentlemen, please, our question for the day, of course, is your African dream, and from an investor's perspective, what do you think for your African dream investors should be putting money into on the continent? Is it education? Do you think it's environmental? Do you think we should be dropping down borders? Where should we be having a conversation around disruption and putting money behind that? Drop your comments below. You can text us, emails in the bottom, and we'll also put in Mr. Mark Collie here, his details. If you want, we'll just link them here, and maybe you can reach out, and if you are in the telco space or a business that might have some synergies, potentially they might be able to ride along in that journey and that African dream.
We're always open to meeting new people and discussing opportunities, and we look forward to anyone who's really who's like-minded and is looking forward to make a change in South Africa and Africa.
Fantastic. There we have it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.